without further ado, I'd like to bring up the next speaker, registered nurse and an amazing community activist, Lanny Swerdlow, everybody.
Well, I see we've lost about half the audience. I hope when I finish up you will decide that it was worth staying for me and not regret that you didn't leave earlier. My name's Lanny Swerdlow, and I've been an activist here in the Indian Empire for about the last 12 years or so. And what I'm going to be talking about today is the sort of things that I've been seeing that's going on and how we can solve some of the problems. We've been talking about a lot of the problems that patients are having and so on. And, well, let's take a look at some things. Now, in November, we had a sea change in the paradigm. Colorado and Washington passed marijuana legalization initiatives. Now, let's applaud that. It was interesting if you watched how the media treated it. It was covered pretty well. Those two elections were covered pretty well before the election. But it was always kind of a nod, wink, you know, kind of stoner thing. They always kind of joked about it. They couldn't take it seriously. But after it passed, things changed. One of the most obvious things was President Obama's first interview after the election was with Barbara Walters, and Michelle Obama also joined it. So this was a very important interview, you know, broadcast all over. And generally when Barbara Walters does an interview, you get some kind of personal things, but she has a limited number of questions to ask. And one of the questions Barbara Walters asked was about marijuana. And, you know, how much more mainstream can you get than Barbara Walters? And marijuana was being asked. And what was interesting was that, you know, beforehand, when the president had been asked questions about marijuana, it was generally these internet seminar things and stuff, and he always just kind of blew it off. You know, he made a joke or something like that. He wouldn't take it seriously. When Barbara Walters was asking it, he had to take it seriously. Then just shortly after that, Time Magazine chose him as Person of the Year. And they did an article where they did an interview with him. And of all the questions they could have asked the President of the United States, with all the problems and everything going on, they also chose to ask him about marijuana. So this is an issue that has become foremost and centermost here in our communities. And the thing is, we have to handle it properly, because if we don't handle it properly, this sort of momentum that we are getting right now could easily vanish. So let's take a look at a little bit of the history of how we got where we all are today. It all started with Proposition 215. That's what started it all. It was a brilliant strategy on the part of Dennis Perone. And I don't use the word strategy, mean devious, we're going to fool the people into voting for this. It's a brilliant strategy because it's the truth. Marijuana is a tremendous medicine. We all know that. Everybody here probably is well aware of its beneficial properties. We've used it over 5,000 years safely, effectively. There's nothing that we've used for so long that provided so much benefit so safely. So we know that. Our grandparents used it. They used to be able to go down to the corner drugstores and get all kinds of medical preparations found in almost every medicine cabinet in the United States. And so we now rediscover its uses for pain and nausea and insomnia and all these other things that we can use it for. But we made a big mistake. We made a major mistake in 1996. And that is, after we passed Proposition 19, the medical marijuana community kind of took this Pollyanna attitude and said, well, look, the voters of California have legalized the use of marijuana and recommended by a physician. Now our elected officials are going to get down to, you know, do what they're supposed to do and enforce the will of the voters. Well, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. But we didn't get organized, but you know who did get organized? Cops. Cops got organized. And less than a month after Proposition 215 passed, then Attorney General Dan Lundgren called a convocation of cops into Sacramento. Over 300 showed up. Somebody through an FOIA sent me the sign-up sheets. It was amazing. It's this thick. Cops from all over the Cape came up to Sacramento. They met there with Attorney General Dan Lundgren and people of the DEA. And was this bringing together of all these police to say, well, gee, look, the voters of California just voted to allow marijuana when recommended by a physician. Let's see what we can do to help enforce the will of the voters. That wasn't what it was at all. It was designed to subvert the will of voters to try to overturn Proposition 215. Well, for the next 8 years, not much really happened. You might have read every now and then somebody getting busted, but for the most part, it was still really underground. It wasn't very, wasn't out in the open or anything. And then in 2004 came a game changer with Senate Bill 420. And the reason 420 was a game changer because it actually set up a kind of a distribution system. It said that patients may collectively and cooperatively associate to produce their medicine. Now, exactly what that means, if you heard the attorneys up here this morning, no one even knows what that really means. But suddenly, patients had some kind of a way in which they could set up some kind of a system. And so some patients started putting these collectives together. And some of them grew rather large, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 members. Well, and when you got a lot of people, you got to provide something too. You're going to have some kind of distribution outlet where they can come and get it. And in this country, we call them stores. And so some of these collectives started setting up stores on Main Street for the members to come down and get their marijuana. Well, the cops saw stores on Main Street selling marijuana. Oh my God, that they can't have this going on. This is a direct threat to them. So the California Chief of Police Association came right into the rescue and issued a white paper. Now this white paper contained a whole bunch of anecdotal stories about this collective was robbed, and this one, had a fight out front, and this one over here took in some fake money. And based on that, they were claiming there was a rise in crime. There was no statistics whatsoever showing that there was any kind of increase in crime, but that's what it did. But the really novel thing about this white paper that has led to so much of our problems is that this white paper contained a model ordinance for cities to use. And this model ordinance was designed to allow cities to ban collectives. And the novel idea they used was that a city, by using its zoning ordinances, can ban the implementation of a state ordinance. So if a state ordinance said you can do this, the city could say you can't do it because we're not going to allow it anywhere in our city for it to happen. Well, so the city started passing these bans and stuff. Well, patients were saying, you can't do that. The state says we can form these collectives, we can form these co-ops. You can't overturn a state law by banning the implementation under its zoning ordinances. So thousands of collectives opened up all over the place here in the state of California, and the cops just freaked. And they started getting the cities to file all these lawsuits to close them down and everything like that. And they weren't very successful. In more cases than not, the cities lost. The court said, no, you can't close them down, especially when it went to the appellate court. Well, the cops got totally frustrated, and so what did they do? They called in the feds. They called in the feds. And don't think for one moment that the feds were sitting in Washington, D.C., and they were looking over here in California and say, oh my goodness, they're opening up these stores on Main Street selling marijuana. We better go in there and stop them. That is not what happened at all. An article in the Los Angeles Times in October 8th in 2011 quoted U.S. Attorney Andre Barot, who was the U.S. Attorney for the area of Los Angeles and so on, said the new strategy was not triggered by any specific event, but was inspired by a stream of complaints from law enforcement officials. In other words, they're here because the cops called them here. Now, we sometimes talk about how upset we are that big corporations and billionaires are buying our system and controlling our government. Yeah, that's really upsetting. But to me, it's even scarier when cops are controlling our government. And that's exactly what we have going on here. Cops working on the taxpayers' dime have been working to overturn a voter-approved initiative. We're paying them to overturn what we voted on. Now, somehow, there's got to be, sounds criminal to me, frankly, certainly unethical. So why aren't our local politicians doing anything about it? I mean, here's the cops, they're paying these cops. They want them to go out and control traffic and reduce burglaries and all this kind of stuff. And instead, the cops are spending a lot of time trying to overturn Proposition 215. You think the elected officials say, no, you're not going to use our money to do that. But that's not why they're saying it. And why aren't they saying it? Because we don't have any power. We're not political. We don't get involved in political campaigns. We don't sit there and give money to politicians and this kind of stuff. We go before city councils, we go before our state senators, our state assembly people, and we say we want this, we want that, we want this, we want that, and what the hell have we ever done for them? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's not how the game is played in this country. We are winning. We're winning this battle. We've seen the latest polls. 52% of people in the United States believe marijuana should be legalized. But we're not getting anywhere. We're not getting anywhere. So, how do we get somewhere? Well, we have to recognize that all politics is local. That's what it is, all local. And we have to start on the local level. And where do we start? Well, I began to realize we have to get involved politically. As a community, we have failed to do so. So how does our community get involved politically where we can actually make a difference? And I started looking around for examples. And the example I found was the lesbian, gay, bi, trans community. They've done some wonders. Now, you know, I don't know who would be more looked down upon by society. People who like to have sex with members of their own sex, or people who smoke pot. But somehow, you know, we're kind of down there. And yet the gay community has done a marvelous job of scoring successes. I think you all heard about the gay marriage thing going on right now. How have they done that? Well, they've done that. They've done that because they got involved politically. And they chose the Democratic Party as their vehicle to get involved in for the most part. And they formed what things called Stonewall Democratic Clubs and Harvey Milk Democratic Clubs. Now, what these Democratic clubs do is they work on the local level. Now, every county has a central committee. Democratic Central Committee, a Republican Central Committee. And this is literally the grassroots of the community politics in the community. They formed these clubs and they got involved in all these particular things and started working for local candidates. Local candidates knew they were working in the Democratic Party. Local candidates knew that they would get these people's support if they would at least talk to them and help them and work with them. They did more than that too. I mean, the gay community, you know, raised millions of dollars throwing fabulous fundraisers for a lot of candidates. They spent thousands and thousands of hours. They paid their dues, and they are now reaping the benefits. Even the President of the United States has now said, I was wrong 4 years ago. I think gay marriage is okay and should be allowed. So I think we need to do the same thing. We need to form political clubs within our local county communities. And the Democrats, you say, why Democrats are supportive of us. They really are. You take a look at October 2012 in the United States Congress. There was a funding bill for the Department of Justice. This comes up every year where the Congress has to vote the money to run the Department of Justice. And as it happened in the past, there was an amendment introduced to defund the Department of Justice from conducting raids in states that allow medical marijuana. In other words, they wouldn't have the money to do it, so the raids wouldn't stop. It's not likely that the cops coming in here and busting us and all this kind of stuff will do it for free. They got to be paid. They wouldn't get the money. It would stop. When it came up for a vote, 72% of the Democrats in Congress voted to defund the Department of Justice, to stop the raids. 72%. Now, they voted against their own president. Remember, these raids are Obama administration's program. And they voted against their own president in an election year. Only 11% of the Republicans voted to defund the Department of Justice, stop the raids. This has got to be the only piece of legislation in 4 years that Barack Obama's been in office in which the Democrats disagreed with him and the Republicans supported him. The Democrats are our friends, but we've got to get out there and we've got to support them. The polls show that 52% of the general population, it's even higher for Democrats. It's around 60% of all Democrats support legalization. So we need to form the same thing. So what I have formed is something called the Brownie Mary Democrat Club. Now, it's an interesting name. I'll tell you how, the name Brownie Mary Democrat. when I wanted to form one of these interest groups, I wanted to form a name, and so I began thinking, what's a good name that people are going to recognize? And the first name I came up with was Bob Marley. Bob Marley Democratic Club. But then I thought, the dreadlocks and all that kind of stuff, that just won't work. And then I thought, the Dennis Perone Democratic Club. And Dennis Perone is the father of medical marijuana. If it wasn't for Dennis Perone, we wouldn't be meeting here today, right now. But I know Dennis, and I know the minute the club did something he didn't like, he'd be on the phone telling us to take his name off the club. So that won't work. So I finally came up with a name, looked around for a figure of prominence, and I came up with Brownie Mary. Now, Brownie Mary, her real name was Mary J. Rathburn. When she was in her 70s, living up in San Francisco, she started baking marijuana-infused brownies and taking them to patients in San Francisco, AIDS patients in San Francisco's hospitals. She was arrested 3 times for doing so, never prosecuted, but they arrested a 70-year-old woman for doing that. San Francisco eventually named a day in her honor, Brownie Mary Day. So I thought this was an appropriate person to name it after. Also, I thought it was appropriate because she's a woman. And this is a male-dominated movement for the most part. And we need to highlight and let people know that women are a major part of this movement, making major contributions that are important. And that's why I wanted to name it after her as well, Brownie Mary Democratic Club. So I formed the club, and it's very easy to form a club. You just have to get the registered signatures of 20 registered Democrats in your county. You get you draw up some bylaws, and you become chartered. It's amazing to me that no one's ever done it before. But in June of last year, the Brownie Mary Democratic Club was chartered by the Riverside County Democratic Central Committee. Here's our charter. We are the first marijuana interest group to ever be affiliated with a major political party. And so I'm really proud of that. And thank you. It gives you enormous inroads. We've been invited to regional meetings and stuff in which there's candidates running and there's elected officials there. We actually get up and we can talk to them. When there's a question and answer, we actually ask them the questions about, do you support this and this kind of stuff? And here they have to talk about it publicly. They don't like to do that. But here they have to talk about it publicly. And generally, they're always very, very supportive. We also had a resolution passed. I introduced a resolution after the election in November. I introduced a resolution calling on the President of the United States to recognize the voters of Colorado and Washington and not have the federal government interfere in the implementation of their new marijuana legalization laws. We asked them to stop the raids in the states of California and other states that are medical marijuana states, and also appoint a commission to look into the reform of marijuana laws. I introduced this to the Riverside County Democratic Central Committee, and it passed almost unanimously. Almost unanimously. The Democrats support us. This is it. Riverside County is one of the more conservative counties, and it passed unanimously. This is the kind of issue that will resonates with Democrats, and we can get in there. And it's beneficial for the Democratic Party too. And that's what I like to make a point out whenever I talk with the Democrat officials and stuff. This is an issue that's important for Democrats. Why? Because it is what the majority opinion is. And right now, you know, when independents are asked about marijuana legalization, their approval rating is even higher than that of Democrats. And this is an issue, marijuana, for people who want to see it legalized. This is a make or break issue. They will overlook a candidate's position on certain other issues. They may not agree with him or her if they are in support of marijuana legalization. Our opponents aren't that way. They may not want to see it, but there's other issues that are going to be far more important to them. But for a lot of marijuana people, this is a make or break issue. I tell them what we could get once the Democratic Party stands up more for ending marijuana prohibition and stuff. We can get a lot of people who are independents to register as Democrats. And I'm finding that out because I've been going out and registering people. I was at this at the High Times Cannabis Cup up in National Orange Show. And here's an example about how we're just so looked down upon. You know, when High Times was originally going to start it, they were going to do it in some studios in Los Angeles. And the cops put pressure on the studios not to allow them to do it. Then they moved it to some studios over in Glendale. And the cops put pressure on there, and the studios revoked the right to do it. So they finally wound up coming to, of all places, San Bernardino, where the National Orange Show is. The National Orange Show is a kind of interesting thing. It's this sort of enclave in the city of San Bernardino that's apparently allowed to operate independently of the city of San Bernardino. And the National Orange Show has made a lot of money lately holding a lot of marijuana-themed events there. And because they allow marijuana smoking to go on. What was so interesting about the High Times Cannabis Cup was they also allowing marijuana to be sold there. If you weren't seeing it, it's just an unbelievable situation. Anyway, so we registered over 50 new people, young people, and almost every one of them registered as a Democrat because of what I'm doing with the Rounding Mary Democratic Club. So it's a way that's going to definitely bring in support from there. Of course, what about President Obama? I mean, how is this going to, he's allowing these raids to go forward. It's happened under his administration. Everyone talks about how there's been more arrests and this kind of stuff under his administration than in the previous George Bush administration. Well, once again, it's what have we done for President Obama? Look at the gay community. They have put hundreds of, they've raised millions of dollars for him. Thousands and thousands of campaign volunteers work for him. 1 in 6 bundlers. Now, a bundler is someone that collects contributions and bundles them all into one big donation and gives it to the candidate. 1 in 6 of President Obama's bundlers were gay. I'm not surprised that suddenly he's in favor of gay marriage. He needed a vote. But you know what? He also recognizes that we're important. I mean, look in Colorado. In Colorado, President Obama won the election. He got more votes than Mitt Romney. But what's interesting is that marijuana got even more votes than President Obama. They recognize that. They see that. They're very concerned about their youth base. The youth base for President Obama is critical. In fact, it was the youth vote in Colorado that got him elected. Otherwise, it would have gone to Romney. And the youth vote came out a lot because of the marijuana initiative, and they also are very pro-Barack Obama. But they're aware of that. And, right now we've got this thing where, there's a lot of pressure on the president right now about this Colorado and Washington thing. They haven't done anything yet. Eric Holder keeps being asked, well, what are you going to be doing about it? He says, well, we're studying the issue, and we're going to be releasing something fairly soon. He's been saying fairly soon for the last 6 months. And still nothing's coming out. And why are they not doing anything? Why is this administration that's cracking down in California and Montana and some of these other states with medical marijuana laws suddenly seeming not to be doing anything with actual marijuana legalization? Well, and it's really puzzling because the pressure on the president to do something about it is enormous, absolutely enormous. He is getting bombarded by police organizations and narcotics officers organizations to do something to squash Colorado and Washington. 9 former heads of the Drug Enforcement Administration have written a letter saying calling on the president to do something to upturn what's going on in Washington and Colorado. Numerous narcotics police officer organizations, one of them you might have heard about, SAM, Smart Alternatives for Marijuana, they are putting pressure on President Obama to do this. Even the United Nations Drug Organization has sent a letter to President Obama telling him he's got to respect the treaties that the United States signed and stop what's going on in Colorado and Washington. So he's got this enormous amount of pressure on him to do something, and yet he hasn't done anything. Well, I'm not aware of us marijuana people putting any kind of pressure on them to do anything. We're not doing anything, and that's a big mistake. And we need to start doing something. And here's one I want to give you an example of one of the things that's happening right now that we can do. Now, I was elected as a delegate for the 42nd Assembly District to the California State Democratic Party Convention. This year, 2013 and 2014 up in Sacramento. I'm going up there next weekend. It's going to be on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. and I'm one of 3,000 people going to be on the convention floor. But we're getting organized here. I've talked with a number of other Democrats who were elected to be delegates like I am, and we're kind of trying to put something together. And we're working with a new organization called the Coalition for Cannabis Policy Reform. This is a group started by Dale Sky Jones and a few others, mainly up there in Northern California. And the idea behind this group is to try to bring all the stakeholders together and get an initiative petition on the ballot that we can all agree on, and not have this disaster like we had in 2012. There was like 7 or 8 different groups running off in all different directions, trying to raise money, none of them raising money successfully. In fact, if you took all the money they all raised together, it wouldn't be enough to get one initiative on the ballot. And then also to try to prevent this fratricidal discord we had during Proposition 19, where members of the community were just at each other's throat over there. They're trying to put something together for either 2014 or 2016. But they have secured a booth at the California Democratic Convention. And they're going to be there distributing and educating all the delegates about marijuana issues. And we are in the process of trying to form a statewide Democratic Hemp and Cannabis Caucus. There isn't very many statewide caucuses. There's about a dozen, because it takes some effort to get one of these things organized. But if we can pull this off, we think we're going to be able to pull it off. This is going to give us an enormous amount of clout, because it tells the elected officials that, look, they have the wherewithal to put together a statewide Democratic caucus. They have enough support within the Democratic Party to do this. That means they must be representing a lot of rank and file Democrats, and they want the votes. They want the votes. You know, we don't have the money. We're not very good at raising the money yet. But you know, votes are important. You know, in our last election, President Obama was being challenged, as I'm sure you know, by Mitt Romney, and this ungodly amount of money being raised by all these Citizens United, anonymous PACs and all this kind of stuff to the tune of $1 billion or more. They tried to buy the election, and they failed. They failed to buy the election. And that's because Obama put together a coalition that could overcome that. Now, I'm not saying he didn't have any money. He had plenty of money, too, because he could not have put this coalition together without a lot of money. But it shows that money on itself is not going to buy the election. And I believe that we can do the same thing ourselves, because there are so many people out there that support medical marijuana. The other thing that, so I've talked about, so how do we put pressure on the president? Well, I mentioned the resolution that I had submitted at the Riverside Democratic Central Committee, calling on the president to recognize Colorado, Washington, and so on. I have submitted this resolution to the Resolutions Committee of the California Democratic Party. It is being considered, and as I understand it, it's going to be, the way it works, I called up, they have like 60 or 70 resolutions that have been submitted. They choose like 10 or so to actually put to the floor. And as I understand it, my resolution is going to be put to the floor for a vote. And if it passes, we will then have the largest Democratic political party in the United States coming out in favor of the president not doing anything. This is the kind of pressure that we need to put on the president. He needs to see that there is tremendous support for letting Colorado and letting Washington to go along with their little experiment on marijuana legalization, and the feds stay the hell out of it. Yes, sir.
What about changing the classification from a Class 1 drug? Wouldn't that circumvent a lot of the problems?
No. No, I understand that. It doesn't solve the problem of legalization. It doesn't solve the problem of legalization. You know, let me explain something. Let me explain why marijuana legalization is so important. You know, when I was up at the Cal Normal thing last, I guess it was October, where they had this big convocation of people, one of the things that really became apparent was that the bottom line for everything that we are doing, the bottom line is ending the war on drugs. The war on drugs is the worst policy thing we've been done since slavery. It's the moral of ending the war on drugs, the moral equivalent of ending slavery. It's inhumane, it's racist, it causes murders like unbelievable, and it doesn't even work. It doesn't even cause a reduction in drug use. We've got to end this war on drugs. But you know what? If we cannot legalize marijuana, we're not going to end the war on drugs. It's an absolute pivotal point in ending the war on drugs. And the cops know. And that's why they are so united against marijuana legalization. Because it's a lot of money. It's a lot of power to them. You know, it's interesting. One of the things when I talk about the comparison with the gay community, we have a tougher road to haul in the gay community. Now, you know, you think gay marriage sounds, wow, that's a pretty tough road to haul. I mean, you know, it went over hundreds of years of you know, bigotry and all this kind of stuff. But you know, the gay community only had to fight some religious organizations. You know, the Mormons pumped $40 million into Proposition 8 and all this kind of stuff. But even the Mormons, if gay marriage goes through and two women can get married, it's not going to cost the Mormon church any money. They're not going to lose a dime. People aren't going to leave the Mormon church because two men can get married. That's not true about marijuana. There's a lot of people that are going to lose a lot of money, especially if marijuana is legalized. And we know about the pharmaceutical companies sell lots less of their prescription pharmaceuticals for pain and for antipsychotics and for insomnia. Those are its biggest money makers. If you don't know it, pharmaceutical companies are not making money selling you antibiotics. They make money selling you prescription painkillers, antipsychotics, and insomnia medications. Yes, sir?
There's actually, last weekend, there was a radio show on NPR about how all pharmaceutical companies have stopped all antibiotic anything.
Yeah, no, they haven't all stopped, but I know what you're talking about. Exactly right. The problem is, I don't want to get into why they're doing that, but you're absolutely right. So they're going to lose millions and billions of dollars. Then the alcohol companies are also going to lose lots of money because when cannabis is widely and easily available, people drink a lot less alcohol. And let me just give you a side story real quickly, because this is something you really need to know and you need to spread the word about. And you may have heard about it, most people have not. But there was a study done last year in the state, mainly in Montana and Colorado. It was a study done by two professors of economics, one in Colorado, one in Montana. And what they wanted to find out was, what happens in a state that passes a medical marijuana law? What changes take place as compared to states around it that don't have medical marijuana laws? And one of the things they found out, like in Montana, was that in the year or so after Montana passed the medical marijuana law, marijuana consumption went up by 23%. 23%. Now, that doesn't surprise me, but a lot of activists always say, well, marijuana consumption isn't going up because they always say everybody can get it. I'm sorry. It was legalized. It went up by 23%. And they wanted to find out, well, where did this increase come from? Where did it reoccur? What is it, sort of generally spread throughout the whole population, or was it centered somewhere? So they looked at the study and it found out that the lion's share of this 23% increase in marijuana use took place in 18 to 35-year-old males. 18 to 35-year-old males. And so they started looking around, well, why, what does this increase, what does this cause? What kind of problems does this cause? And one of the things they found out was that beer consumption, beer sales in Montana decreased by 5.5%. Now, what is the beverage of choice, alcohol beverage of choice of 18 to 35-year-old males? It's beer. It's beer. And they concluded, because there was no other factor they could possibly find, that the reason the beer sales decreased by 5.5% was because 18 to 35-year-old males started smoking so much marijuana and consequently started drinking less. Interestingly enough, as they started looking around for other things, they found another very interesting statistic. And that was that there was a decrease by over 9% of alcohol-related traffic fatalities. Over 9%. And they looked around for what else could possibly cause this big of a decrease in alcohol-related traffic fatalities. And there wasn't anything else except 18 to 35-year-old males had significantly decreased their consumption of alcoholic beverages. So marijuana leads to a decrease in alcohol-related traffic fatalities. And you know, do anybody here remember seeing that in the newspapers or in any broadcast media stories? You don't see it. If it was just the other way around, and in fact the study showed there was an increase in traffic fatalities, it would be on the front page of every paper, it would be the lead-in story in every broadcast media, the government would see to it for sure that that would be out there. But because it's positive, you never hear anything about it. But that's why we need to, getting back to what I was saying, we need to talk about why we need to legalize marijuana. Because if we don't legalize marijuana, the war on drugs is not going to come in, and these companies realize it. But not only do the alcohol companies realize it, and the pharmaceutical companies, the ones who realize it most is the cops. You take all the money the pharmaceutical companies will lose, and all the money the alcohol companies will lose, and it doesn't begin to match the amount of money the cops are going to lose if the war on drugs comes to an end. Because we're spending $50 billion a year on the war on drugs. And this is why they're just absolutely incensed about this. You know, they've always fought medical marijuana. Why are the cops tying themselves up in knots over whether some cancer patient could go out and smoke some marijuana? Because they believe that medical marijuana leads to marijuana legalization. It does. It does. And marijuana legalization will cost them a lot of money, and they believe, and I think they're correct, that marijuana legalization will eventually bring to an end to the war on drugs. And that's going to cost them a lot of jobs and a lot of money. I got news to you. You know, there is not, the amount of cops and prison guards and attorneys that are involved in the war on drugs, there is not enough crime in this country to use all those people. And a lot of them are going to be on the unemployment line. And I think we'll see an uptick in the unemployment figures if the war on drugs ever comes to an end. Although that would be very, very temporary. There's a lot of benefits coming on. Okay, so what I hear here, I have some flyers and stuff back there on the Brownie Mary Democratic Club. I would love to see one formed here in the city of in the county of San Diego. We're working right now on forming some in Los Angeles County, in San Francisco County, in Sacramento County, and in Humboldt County, but I'd like to see one formed here. You know, it's really exciting to be involved with it. I now serve on the Central Committee of Riverside County. It's really exciting to be involved in politics. It's fun. You really feel like you're making a difference, and you get to meet these people. You're not, you know, just kind of barking around the edges. You're now at the center of action. You are the place where things are being made and decisions are being made, and you can actually have an effect. When you go to a politician, you go to an elected official's office, and you're representing a club that is chartered by your county Democratic Central Committee, they pay attention. On the local level, most elected officials, when they run for office, they count on the Central Committee to get them the volunteers to get out there and campaign for them. They pay attention to what the Central Committee says because they need the Central Committee's support. So this is how you can get out there and you can get involved. You can really make a major difference in what we're doing there. So thank you very much. Any questions?
So, in terms of the states' rights issue, which is developing in this marijuana legalization arena, this to me always seems like it's a flat-out Republican issue. It really resonates with that. Where is, you know, your counterpart on the Republican side on this?
You know, I hear this all the time. It's the Republican thing, you know, states' rights. The Republicans drag out state rights only when it's an issue that they believe in, and if it's something they don't believe in, suddenly states' rights goes right out the window. They're just a pile of a bunch of hypocrites, really. There is, you know, the gay community has these log cabin Republican clubs, very ineffective. I mean, to me, it's you know, being a log cabin member in the Republican Party is like being Catholic and being gay. You know, it just doesn't work out very well. And so there, you know, I encourage people to do it. But I think the question is, where are we going to make the progress? Where should we spend our time? And I think spending our time in the Republican Party is a waste of time.
It's unfortunate because the Congress is still Republican, and you can't bring it
just the House. Just the House.
Yeah, right.
Just the House. But the thing you understand, there are Republican members who are very supportive of this. You know, we've got Roebuck here in Orange County, very, very supportive of our issue. So there are some Republicans who certainly are, and we need their votes because, you know, all Democrats are not supportive of us. Most might be, but there are certain ones who are not supportive of us also. So we're going to have to curry favor with the Republicans as well. Absolutely. What I'm saying, though, is that we are so far down in having any kind of political clout whatsoever that we need to get involved with political parties. Sometimes, you know, people get a very bad taste in their mouth about political parties? Well, you get a bad taste in your mouth because the wrong people are in process. And the right people are you. You're the right people. And you need to get involved. And how many, is everybody here registered to vote? Okay, if you're not registered to vote, there's registration forms there. And if you're registered as an independent, I urge you to re-register as a Democrat. And then let the Democratic officials know that you're a Democrat, because you're voting in the Democratic primaries then. And it's in the primaries when, you know, small groups of people make a big difference in the outcome of an election. And so they start paying attention. When it comes to votes, that's when they're going to start listening to you. That's when they're going to start listening to you. And, yes, sir?
I want to just touch on what you guys just exchanged.
Yeah.
I just read an article, I can't remember where it was yesterday, I can't remember. They said that now in Washington, especially the Republicans, when they're getting calls from marijuana people, instead of hanging up the phone, they're asking for money. But they were saying how they were just saying how it's a step. They're Republican and they're not slamming the phone down.
What happened in Colorado and Washington has changed the paradigm totally. And the question is, what are we going to do with it? Are we going to do with what we did in 1996 and just expect everything to go nicely? Or are we going to sit there and be a little more intelligent this time? In 1996, we should have been at the doors of the state legislature demanding implementation legislation be introduced right away. We would not be having these problems we're having today if we would have done that. We didn't get implementation legislation until 8 years later, in 2004. And that implementation legislation was just overwhelmingly sabotaged by cops. This stupid 6-plant limit, that's cops. This collective, and you know, we got this collective system, collective and cooperative. You have these lawyers here trying to explain this to you. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to stand on your head. You know, I thought collectives went into the ash can of history 25 years ago with the collapse of the Soviet Union. But somehow collectivism is resurrected as the preferred method of distribution to medical marijuana patients in the state of California. Stupid, stupid, stupid. You know, you regulate, you license, you tell them to be like any other store and any other business, and you have a properly run system. You wouldn't have this disaster with patients getting arrested, and providers getting arrested, and nobody knows what to do, and you got to go find some lawyer and pay them $5,000 to $10,000 to sit there and allow you to open up a store. And even then, you're going to probably wind up paying another $5,000, $10,000 to get you out of jail when you get put in jail. It's a stupid system, and we've got to change it. But it's not going to change until we have the political power to do it. And that's what this is all about. Thank you.
All right, everybody, we are almost done. Don't leave just yet. Don't forget about the raffle. But one more time, big round of applause for Lanny Swerdlow, everybody.